I'd like to start this segment with a shout out to Ryan Long. He's a comedian. Many of you are probably familiar with him. He's hilarious. And he's got a new segment, a new bit, where he's an expert and says, trust the experts because the experts agree. And then when his friend comes in and says, I'm an expert and I've read the data and come to a slightly different opinion, the one expert starts beating the crap out of the expert who disagrees, because that's basically what happens. We have all these people in the mainstream media saying science is settled and the experts agree, even though the science changes often because that's what makes science science. And they say the experts agree, but there are plenty of doctors who do not agree. Certainly, I think there's a lot of crackpots, and I don't trust Dr. Fauci because he's flip-flopped back and forth. So who do you trust? Well, I always say this. Make sure you find an individual medical professional that you trust. And I think that's completely reasonable. If you've got an issue with politics, you don't trust someone, find a better doctor. But what we're getting now is a one-way street. You can go on social media and basically say anything so long as it fits the narrative. But if you question the narrative experts, you are banned. YouTube bans all anti-vaccine content, not just COVID-19 related. The New York Post reports YouTube is banning several prominent anti-vaxxers from its site, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and will delete all content that suggests approved vaccines are harmful or don't work, the company said Wednesday. The online video platform, which is owned by Google, said in a blog post it is cracking down on content that falsely claims vaccines can cause chronic health effects. It is also targeting content that includes misinformation on the contents of approved vaccines. The new ban applies to all vaccines, not just COVID-19. This is how you enact despotism. There are a lot of people who are anti-vax, and they believe a lot of things about vaccines that are not true. There are a lot of people who might exaggerate certain things about vaccines and create a false understanding or misinterpretation of it. You see, this is the game. I had Jack Murphy on the TimCast podcast a couple weeks ago. He's back tonight. This should be fun. We got Seamus Coughlin in town as well. It's going to be the Illinois boys. Make sure you go check out TimCast IRL on YouTube and podcasts and whatever. And we had him on. He was talking about his son wanting to play sports. His son, in order to play sports, would have to get vaccinated. Jack does not believe the vaccine will hurt his son. His son will be fine. He just doesn't know if it's necessary, and the state is effectively mandating it, forcing him to go through it. It's a very difficult position to be in because you want your kid to thrive and to chase his passions. And the state is basically saying, oh, yeah, we got to do this thing. Here's the game. Okay, YouTube. I have a lot of people who are like, Tim, why are you a shill for vaccines? Guys, vaccines are awesome. Now, you want to talk about long-term health effects on mRNA stuff? Okay, we can have a conversation about that because that's currently in the process. The studies are currently undergoing. Though the FDA has approved the community vaccine, which is, as they say, interchangeable with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Talking about any medical issue in general, saying that you are not allowed to have opinions opposing this is the slippery slope. Am I supposed to come out and be like, this is a good thing because they're wrong? No. I do think they're wrong, by the way. I actually did an interview with people at the CDC. I've investigated this. And I think what you typically hear is, yes, we know there are adverse events. We have VAERS specifically because of this. Some people have severe adverse events. You got to talk to a medical professional you trust. And the hope is a bit utilitarian in that sense that more people will benefit from the vaccine than will be harmed by it. And the harm really is minuscule. You know, people like to go to the vaccine adverse event reporting system and they pull examples saying, see, this proves it. And I'm like, guys, there are a lot of reports going into VAERS. I understand that. But we also have a mass nationwide vaccination event. My issue is with the authoritarianism. They will approach a normal, regular run-of-the-mill person and say, here's the data on vaccines. And when I look at it, I'm like, that's actually great. It's rather promising. Now, as to whether someone wants to get it is between them and their doctor and their health issues and their religious beliefs and not me or the state or, even a private business within reason, especially considering we would need to have a legislative process and public debate and long-term studies. But that's not for me to say. Right? What you choose to do with your body. We have people on the show all the time who are vaccinated. Our guests the other night were talking about how they got vaccinated. And I'm like, that's great. You do your thing, right? We're about freedom and individualism. The problem here is it's an exploit. When you go to a regular person who will be like, yeah, vaccines are cool. Then they say, see, shouldn't we have the ability to ban anyone who dare oppose our narrative? That's the problem. We're supposed to have free and open discourse. But when it comes to political issues surrounding the approved narrative, it is being destroyed. We're going to go back in time, my friends. This is what one thing I've been warning about since the dawn of the censorship debate. There was a period where you had but 4 broadcast towers. I mean, maybe 5, whatever. But you had basically NBC, CBS, ABC, and these were the big channels. And opinion was filtered through them. Most people only heard what they were told on the TV. And often it was wrong. One of the greatest things the United States has going for it, for a while, was decentralization. Why did our economy expand? Why was there so much innovation? Why did we become so powerful? Because we had big, open, empty spaces to try things, to experiment. Decentralized authority, but it's centralizing. So we eventually come to radio and then television, and then we start getting homogenized opinion. There are benefits, for sure. Unified public opinion, people marching behind the main narrative because it's the only thing they hear, and no one really having access to information to challenge it. But is that really the country that we want? Centralized propaganda distribution from the state? From state-approved sources? No. You see, the way I see it is, there's a lot of benefits to mass communication. But what we need is an ability to challenge mainstream narratives. And if the true narrative from the establishment is correct and effective, it should win out. If the ideas are bad, they should lose out. Shutting down people you disagree with without actually challenging their ideas does not prove, I'll quote Tyrion Lannister, Game of Thrones. When cutting out a man's tongue does not prove him wrong. It simply proves you fear what he might say. It's a brilliant quote. And so this is what the problem I see from this is the internet is vast. TimCast.com allows us to publish stories YouTube doesn't want us to talk about. Typically, a lot of people think that we set up TimCast.com and the members only segment specifically because we shield our real opinions. That's not true. My real opinions are on YouTube. There's just some things we try to be delicate about because we don't want to get banned. We want to make sure there's that opportunity for people to go to timcast.com. But for the most part, it's just bonus content. Now, we can talk about certain issues in public debate that YouTube doesn't allow. And that's the interesting thing. When I had Steve Bannon on, I very much disagree with him when it comes to widespread voter fraud. And I get it. I've seen a lot of the arguments from a lot of people. I am still working, we're working through trying to figure out what's going on with Arizona. A lot of people think we're going to immediately just jump at the latest publication and be like, there you go. We got to dig through this stuff, man. And for the most part, we can't really talk about a lot of it on YouTube because we don't know if they're going to be honest. That's the issue. Censorship is a real problem. Hopefully, people watching this show and watching TimCast IRL will find timcast.com and then hear those debates. Because I'll tell you why it's important. Steve Bannon, smart guy. I have tremendous respect for him. He's awesome. I'm grateful for him coming on the show, but we disagree on some things, and that's cool. We're allowed to. He believes there's fraud. I don't think there is. So we have this debate. The problem is YouTube won't allow him to say his side of the debate, for which I could argue against. One of the things I pointed out when it came to the 2020 election and what we're seeing in California and what we're seeing moving forward, Democrats got ground game. They control media institutions, social media. They ban ideas that oppose their narrative. That's how they control things. So when people say there's no way Biden got 81 million votes, I'm like, dude, did you do a survey of your friends and family? I'm someone from a big urban center, Chicago. And I know people in Chicago who hate Democrats, have always hated Democrats. And I know people who skateboard. And skateboarders don't care about politics. They never talk about it. They say, shut up, I don't want to hear about it. And these people were walking out and they were voting. And I'm like, you got to understand what universal mail-in voting does. Now, does that mean I know definitively what's going on behind this? Of course not. I just think if your immediate conclusion is to jump to the conspiracy, you may miss what's right in front of you. Republicans need that ground game. And you know what? Whatever you think about fraud or whatever, it is a fact. Republicans need better ground game, and they're at a disadvantage due to population density in rural areas. Anyway, I digress. We have that debate. But the things Steve Bannon says in that debate, YouTube would ban. So how am I supposed to justify my positions even when I say, hey, I think this is wrong? How do I do it? You see, this is the problem. YouTube hopes out of sight, out of mind. That if we simply purge all of this, it'll be all over. Except Alex Jones still has a website, banned.video and other URLs. He's still on the radio everywhere. He still gets millions of views, and I'm sure it did have an impact. They were probably thinking like, we shouldn't put this guy on the front page of YouTube where it's going to get billions of views, but that doesn't change the fact that you can still share his videos, people still watch his videos, and you can't just shut this conversation down. All you do is prove you fear what they might say. So I tell you this, man. I am not anti-vaxxer, although the media just says whatever stupid trash anyway. Most people aren't. Of course, there are some people who are. When it comes to the mRNA vaccine, someone comes to me with a religious, question about certain contents in the vaccine, or they state that they're waiting for long-term effects, or they want to know the risk to pregnancies. These are all things you can find on the CDC website. You don't come to me for advice. You go to them. And I'm like, shouldn't we be allowed to have these questions? No. You see, what YouTube wants to be a network. They don't want to be YouTube. They want to be UsTube. So perhaps, you say they don't mind me. Because we agree. We agree on a lot of basic issues, establishment narratives in a sense. Now, that being said, I absolutely do challenge the mainstream narratives all the time, and I rag on the media for lying all the time. And I suppose they find that decently acceptable. So for me, I'm not banned just yet. But to be real, there are certain topics like voter fraud debate that we need to have off of YouTube. Otherwise, they'd ban us for talking about it. Or talking about things like ivermectin. Again, which I am not a proponent of. I've read a lot of this, and you know what my fear is? I feel like too many people might have a counter-dependent identity. We've had some really great people on TimCast IRL. One guest was talking about counter-dependent identities where they believe things based on opposing the other. I think this is predominantly among the establishment left, but does exist among the right as well. And so you'll see if Dr. Fauci says something dumb, you don't agree with the mandates, you don't believe in the lockdowns, you know the media lies, so you say, I don't trust them. But then you hear some other doctor on YouTube say something and you're like, I'm going to choose to trust him. Why? I don't trust anybody. I mean, okay, that's a bit bold, but for the most part, I don't trust people randomly online. I want to see the evidence. I read the story from the New York Post. I have varying degrees of trust for many different institutions and establishment organizations. But for the most part, I think everyone's got their agenda, and some's good, some is good and some is bad. And I certainly think that I got to be honest. I told you this. I talked to the CDC, one of the higher ups. I think I talked to the guy who runs it. I can't remember. It's been a while. And I was like, a lot of people are concerned about negative impacts from vaccination, and they don't lie about it. They say, yeah, of course, any medication is going to have side effects, and sometimes they're severe. We're just hoping that more people benefit than are hurt by it. And the reality is it's overwhelming benefit. A lot of people have said, Tim, they've talked about efficacy of the vaccines. Yes, this is a fact. For older people, we have seen efficacy decline. There have been several studies, particularly out of Israel. However, there are also several studies that we've published on TimCast saying that the Pfizer and Moderna remain overwhelmingly effective in dealing with this. A lot of people say, oh, but if you get vaccinated, you can still get COVID, as if to say your likelihood is the same. You can still get COVID, but your likelihood is dramatically reduced. Now, listen, I'm not here to argue what it means to be efficacious, effective, or otherwise. That's for you and your doctor. I don't know what YouTube's editorial guidelines of where they decide to draw that line. The point is, and I should talk about some of these other issues that are happening because DeSantis is moving forward, coming after Facebook over this stuff. They will come to someone like me and say, hey, Tim, you think anti-vaxxers are wrong, right? And I'll be like, I think for the most part they're wrong. Yeah, I'm certainly willing to entertain any debate or conversation. Yeah. So we shouldn't allow them to speak. And then I say no. But too many people will say yes, the easy path. And where will we be in 10 years? You will once again have the ivory tower of propaganda telling you what is true and what isn't, and the ability of people like me to challenge the establishment to fact check will no longer exist. It is the cliffs eroding. And while I may be standing fairly closely to land far away from those cliffs, this is what they do. Eventually they'll say, anyone who opposes the war, anybody who spreads misinformation about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq will be removed from YouTube. You see, that's the plan. That's the point. They approach you with something reasonable. They did this with, there was this Security Act about like stopping trafficking. And they were like, we shouldn't allow websites an exemption when it comes to trafficking. And I'm like, me and many others, of course they talk about trafficking. Because what good American would ever support trafficking? But what they're really doing is saying, we would like to give ourselves arbitrary powers of enforcement that you can't argue against. Gradually, and then suddenly. But let's talk about the real issues here. DeSantis is pushing election officials to investigate Facebook. I'll give you the gist of this story. There was a Facebook program reported by the Wall Street Journal that said there are about 5 million VIP whitelisted individuals who are allowed to post, break the rules, not be held accountable. On Twitter, Laura Loomer, banned. She was running for public office. Twitter allows her opponent to be on the platform, but not her. Sorry, she broke the rules. You see the game being played? That is right there, the overt consequence of what YouTube and others are doing with the censorship. They will convince you hate speech is wrong. We must censor. And then you say, okay, well, we don't like hate speech. I don't like hate speech. What is hate speech, you say? Disparaging individuals on arbitrary means, such as race or national origin or things like that. I think if you want to criticize ideologies, you should be allowed to. So that's not hate speech. But I think if you're, well, to be honest, I think you have a right to your opinion, no matter what your opinion is. But hate speech is typically, and if we're trying to be honest about what people mean when they say it, like being racist, disparaging someone on the basis of race. Hey, I think that's bad. I don't like it. I don't think people should do it. But I certainly appreciate when racists say these things. You know why? Then I know they're racist, and then I can say, I don't want to associate with you or do business with you. Imagine these people who are taking money and empowering racism, like legit, real racism, like they really hate other people on the basis of race. And you don't know. Let's say you sell mattresses and there's someone you cut a great deal with and you're like, this is fantastic. And then you later realize the deal you're cutting them is providing them extra resources towards promoting racism. You'd be like, that sucks. I don't want to do that. So by all means, let them say they're garbage so I know to avoid them. So we as a society can say we argue against this. What they're trying to do is gain control, win elections, dominate the narrative, and shut down anyone who dare oppose them. There is a real American public. They don't like war. That's one thing all of the populists agree on. They do not like war. But the war machine, the military-industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, does not want to give up its ability to wage war. The United States petrodollar, the global system, international settlements, whatever you want to call it. Some people say the Illuminati, the globalists. Well, you've got special interests that want the United States going overseas, blowing people up, so that they can control resources and then just have authority and access and power over others. The American people don't care for that. The American people overwhelmingly just want to be left alone, raise their kids, eat a nice slice of pizza with their son, play catch, teach their daughters about, how to fight the machine and break that glass ceiling. And you think I'm kidding? I think most people want to see their, daughters break the glass ceiling, no doubt. Just because social justice warriors kind of ruin a lot of these narratives doesn't mean it's not true that most people want to see their children succeed. And that's what they want for their kids. Instead, what do we get? The media wants to promote a narrative of war. What are we getting out of Afghanistan? It's a narrative of war. The Mark Milley, we warned Biden to leave 2,500 troops in Afghanistan or this would happen. And then what? The neocons are going to be like, aha, Biden, what a loser. They're trying to restore the faux two-party, uniparty system where the neocons are like, Democrats are bad. Don't you agree? We should have kept our troops there. If we want to have a strong populist movement, we must allow everyone to express their opinions, to challenge the establishment. But what the machine wants, they want to be able to have whitelisted specials, individuals who are allowed to say whatever they want. And we know it. We've seen it. If you espouse the establishment narrative, be it Democrat or neocon, you're fine. But if you're one of these populists, typically on the right, sometimes on the left, and you challenge the establishment, they're going to find a reason to remove you. Steven Crowder got multiple strikes for challenging, for simply stating CDC data. I believe that was one strike. It's not about whether or not you are following any rules. It's about the YouTube and the media and the government trying to establish a set of rules that are ever expanding and vague. That way, when they say it was misinformation, they eliminate anyone who dare oppose them. Imagine you have 99 scientists who all say the sky is blue and one says the sky is green. And then over time, people aren't really talking about it. There's a big effort among social media to claim the sky is green, and a bunch of people fearing being excised from their cult start agreeing the sky is green. Eventually you get to a point where you have about 10 of those scientists out of 100 saying the sky is green. Unfortunately for us, those scientists also have good connections at social media. So social media began suppressing and oppressing those scientists who say the sky is blue. Eventually, almost no one is saying the sky is blue, and the only thing you hear in the press is the sky is green. Now, you might sit here and be like, I know the sky. I'm looking at it. These people are nuts. But if you speak up, they will ban you. Where does that lead us? Your children. They will grow up only ever hearing the sky is green. And they'll say, I don't know, that's how it's always been. That's what's happening. They are excising people, the majority, from the narrative to enact a cultural revolution. Now, it may not be intentional. Believe whatever you want to believe. It's certainly what is happening. So I will tell you this. I do not like anti-vaxxers. Like, I'm talking about legit anti-vaxxers. I do not like their cause. Okay. Now, to be fair, many of them may just be saying liberty and choice. That's fine. I don't like the idea that people would spread misinformation. I'm fact-checking these news outlets all of the time. I can't stand it. I hate it when they lie, when they manipulate. I don't care if you're a small activist or a major corporation. So when I see the overt anti-vax rhetoric that exaggerates certain things, I'm like, can we just be sane and rational? Can we say something like, I have concerns and it's my choice? And I'm like, you're right, it's your choice. Have a nice day. And instead, what we get is people who believe, extreme things in any direction, trying to demand the state enforce their worldview. Well, with the left, they're winning. That's my issue. I want intelligent debate. I want skepticism. I don't think you should go and trust, Dr. Brett Weinstein simply because he's not Dr. Fauci. I think if you trust him, it should be because you reviewed his analysis and his data and the countervailing narrative, and then make a determination for yourself on what you think seems to be the most accurate. If someone is worthy of your respect and trust, it's because they've earned it. I will not just trust someone simply because they're the opposition. That being said, we need to have this kind of discourse. I think the gamble from the establishment is if we can ban anyone who dare oppose establishment narrative, within 10 or 15 years, all that will be left is establishment narrative. And then you get homogenization. And unfortunately, I think centralization is a mistake. It makes you sluggish. This country succeeded on decentralization, and it's going to weaken us severely. It is a fool's game. You can try to be the despot. You can gain some power and control in some way. Decentralization is key, though. That's what we're standing up for, is the ability for people to express their opinions, to do the research themselves, and to be heard. Otherwise, you get chaos, stagnation, and authoritarianism. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.